Hey folks, and welcome to another episode of Crit Hit Reviews with your host, Arlyeon. On today's episode, I'll be talking about the review copy I received of Brainbox.cc's rapid-fire puzzle game, Mr. Boom's Firework Factory. Find out if I thought it made for a spectacular show or if it had me on a perpetual short fuse. So, the premise for this particular game is fairly straightforward, as you find yourself a new hire at the game's eponymous Fireworks factory. That said, it's not too long before you discover your new gig probably doesn't provide employee insurance. After all, that would imply you'd survive the ramshackle state of the building, the haphazard conveyor belts containing fireworks, and the more anomalous material you're shipping. And what's the deal with all the air quotes while your boss is speaking? Summary bits aside, I was actually rather fond of the way the story unfolds in this title. Each level's kicked off with a small bit of dialogue from the boss, the likes of which doubles as a story development and some hints about the stage. It helps to give the game a bit more flavor, and in context with some of the environmental storytelling, and a set of side events that occur during a few stages, adds a bit to the overall experience. Seriously though, some of the things that Mr. Boom says had me practically spit-taking. Partly out of indignation in at least one instance. That said, where the story certainly did its part to bring me a few notable grins, I had far more mixed feelings on the way this title played out. See, while Mr. Boom's Fireworks Factory is a puzzle game, it's notably one which takes gleeful enjoyment out of enraging the player in seeing them restart its levels over and over again. Some of this is simply due to the basic balancing act that the game asks the player, as they're tasked with sending crepes looping through ever-growing mazes of conveyor belts in an effort to get them to the exit without crashing them into anything, timing out, and in the right order to boot. But I don't mind that part. Frankly, I rather enjoyed a fair number of the earlier stages. There was something satisfying about figuring out just how to arrange things so I could flawlessly execute them and get a 3-star score. That said, it certainly wasn't easy for me, especially given that there were a number of elements in the game's base design which seemed outright poised to frustrate players. One element, for instance, is an inability to pause or slow things down in an effort to get your bearings. Whilst this wasn't so bad early on, there's stages where crates of cargo are vomited out onto the field within moments, leading to some calamitous chaos. And this was further compounded by your inability to make informed decisions. See, whilst you do get to see the relative order that the crates are going to arrive at, you don't actually get to find out how long until the next crate is arriving, or if there's any crates queued up behind it. I found myself frequently just waiting out later levels to try and get my bearings on the relative order of crates and their timing, cycling through this painful process over and over again because the information simply wasn't available to me, nor was I able to pause and try to plan things out. Unfortunately, this problem became compounded by other factors. For one thing, if you decide to retry a level, the game's clock is already running while you're loading, so it's entirely possible for a level to queue up with you instantly losing. What's more, the game began to chug and lag as I continually lost, requiring that I occasionally exit out to the menu so that it would be responsive. But even that didn't quite frustrate me so much as the arbitrary and altogether unfair nature of some of the challenges. And I'm not simply talking about the fact that the levels don't really explain the new mechanics they introduced and instead simply launch you into the fray blindly, so that you have to go through a large handful of fail states to achieve victory. No, the other part that was galling was the simple fact that even doing the exact same thing in a given level may not necessarily achieve the same results. I had instances of boxes arbitrarily exploding while on loops, and in turn detonating other crates across the screen with fragments from that box. I had toxic pools randomly spreading on the ground with portions of it fading away, at random. Just infuriating things which often made some of the losses feel less like trials of skill and more like gambles, like awaiting for the stars in the fucking heavens to align just so I might win. And speaking of gambling, I mentioned earlier that I went out of my way to 3-star levels. Whilst this was mostly for my own self-satisfaction, it does have a benefit as it allows you to access the crate room, a room with completely generic looking crates that you can click on to maybe get a power up at random. It's It is by definition an arbitrary process and one that you really are not able to strategize around to prepare for some of the levels, so I mostly neglected the use of items for as long as I could. Especially because if you end up restarting a level, the items that you have used remain gone, meaning that incorporating them into your strategy would require you to redo a good handful of earlier levels in the hopes that you might get what you want. Yes, there's a late game level that does allow you to farm up these items, but it's fairly later on and still requires you to redo that level over and over and over again. Also, did I mention the fact that it's both easy to accidentally use them while you're frantically clicking around to end up blocking off bits of the conveyor belt with their use screen? How about the fact that you can completely overload the item use tab to the point that it disallows you from accessing other items you need? Yay! Honestly, the main thing that kept me going to the end of my run-through was sheer, petty stubbornness. That and, that level that provided a handful of consumable items just so I could cheese my way through, which really helped the process of merely scraping by the later stages. Oh, and by the way, my frustrations? Those don't just end strictly with mechanics. See, whilst I dug the sort of cutesy visuals for our not-so-illustrious factory owner, I didn't have any qualms with the factory itself. I was fucking floored by the sheer number of times the game decided to muck up the screen with intrusive, impenetrable clouds of fog, which showed up as a game mechanic. Enough so that when it later introduced a stage thoroughly mired in a toxic haze, I was practically choking to death on my own strangled rage. I detested the sheer number of times when the game decided that obscuring floor tiles with nigh unavoidable fog from spawning crates made interacting with them a nightmare, or mucking up an entire room to make it detestably difficult to see anything. I actually found myself messing around with the game's visual settings repeatedly, just to turn them so low that I wouldn't be blinded by these impenetrable hazes that would have otherwise been quite at home on the streets of London. Though, doing so also had a penchant for causing other issues to crop up, so I was frequently trading one evil for another. Really, the closest thing on an aesthetic front that I can actually offer praise for is the sound, given that Mr. Boom himself has some actually delightfully hammy voice acting to kick off in the various stages. Like, it made me want to punch the character, but I'm pretty sure that was intended in all his conspicuously evil glory. Also, there was some pretty decent music to listen to as I went across my journey. I really wish there wasn't such unavoidable, loud explosions whenever you retry the level. Fuck! You know what, it might... Instead of doing it so much that it was even worse when some of the level effects briefly glitched and followed me to the next stage until I quit the game. So, yeah, that's been my experience with this title. And this is our finale, and I just don't really know what to say. There's portions of the game I did enjoy, some stages that I genuinely felt like I was playing a clever puzzle game, but there was just so much that went wrong as I went through that I ultimately felt my enjoyment drain away as I proceeded, along with my will to live. Even the story and its voice work could do little to stave off the mounting sense of misery as I proceeded further into the game. It's for this reason that I really can't say I would recommend this title at this juncture, as it distinctly feels like an altogether unfair and almost vindictive experience. Which is why I say it rates as a fail. Perhaps if some of these elements I mentioned are eventually patched, I could see it becoming a fumble, especially for those folks who enjoy the way some rage games make you feel like you've been freshly punched in the dick. But I just cannot right now, okay? I just can't. Anywho, thanks for tuning in. If you agree, disagree, or just have something to say to me, feel free to comment. And for those interested in more indie reviews, developer interviews, podcasts, or Monday TTRPG content, hit the subscribe button and the bell so you know when there's a new release. There's also a Discord, and you can click the link in the banner or the description so you can be part of our community, the Crit Hit Cauldron. And lastly, if you'd like to help support the channel and maybe my drinking problem I got from playing this game, we have a coffee running now to help supplement funds for a lovely editor, and to make sure we continue to provide quality content. Again, you can check the link in the description and the banner for them links, and to help me destroy myself further after this. Anyways, I'll catch you folks later on the next episode of Crit Hit. Take care then, folks. I am fucking done and emotionally exhausted. That's all there is to it. See ya.